Yo, Zalia's here, and I'm going to be covering uh, basically parts in different sections of the debate that I covered with Weaboo Warrior, covering our discussion on Yusuke versus Naruto. The debate was pretty good. I definitely need to do more debate so that I can feel more comfortable with it because you do have to think and get things on. So I missed a few things that I could have pulled, but that kind of comes with it. You just got to get more practice in. But what I want to do is, with the main focus of everything, is to be as accurate as possible. So I'm gonna revisit, break it down into more consumable parts, and we can kind of go over what's shown and look at it with a pure lens of aiming to be as accurate and consistent as possible, wherever that may lead. Um, I will say that I think enough feats were shown that me saying that Naruto is merely country level is now wrong. I will say I have changed my opinion that I can definitely see a clear cut path for potency to get them to continental level. And I will continue to use logic that applies for accuracy and consistency. Because while it is a debate, I don't care too much for it necessarily just for the sake of it being a debate. It's more so about fleshing out ideas and arriving to the correct conclusion. Being correct is the goal, because if you don't care about being correct, then anything you say, who cares, right? So, I'm going to essentially just be adding in my commentary and going from there. I'll stop it whenever I feel is needed and address things as needed. Enjoy.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
All right. Well, I mean, to begin with, because this is pretty formal, at least in my opinion. We could either do like openings, or we could just kind of cover, kind of just point by point.
Yeah, we could do just like a quick opening and say like what our position is, and then we could do like point by point. Like we could talk power, speed, potency, abilities, whatever.
Okay. You want to start or me?
I'll start real quick.
Okay.
Okay. So I think Naruto could beat Yusuke because he's shown better feats all around, better power, better speed. He has better abilities. Uh, I don't think he'll be able to prove that Yusuke has the necessary tools to defeat Naruto. And that about sums up my opening.
Well, Yusuke is kind of a pseudo brick character, so almost exactly what you said, but mirrored. I think Yusuke landslides in potency and durability. I'm also quite confident that he outspeeds, but I think potency alone and his aura would be potent enough to probably at least take care of all of his clones, if not Naruto himself. And I think he can potentially just wipe with aura.
Okay, so when it comes to raw power, I think Naruto has the edge, obviously, because he does have flashier feats than Yusuke. I think we could both agree to that. But I like
Yeah,
how. What was that?
I agree. They're definitely flashier.
Yeah. So, obviously, his flashiest feat is probably when he blocked the attack that could cut through the moon.
Yep.
And then there's also how Naruto and Sasuke together basically created a moon. Though you could argue it's only because the Sage of the Six Paths granted them his power, but together they were considered to rival his power anyways, so they should have power that rivals that. And people did scaling and pixel scaling and showed that it should be about the size of our moon, which I don't think is really necessary because that same technique literally created the original moon in the first place, so I think it's pretty reasonable to say it's about moon size. And
Oof.
then we also have the Ten Tails itself, whose chakra was compared to the planet itself, and how it could create massive tailed beast bombs casually that were about, I would say, small country sized in power, or you could argue a large island or something like that, but it's definitely a lot of power from the Ten Tails. And there is another feat. Hold on. Right here, of it showing its destructive capability across the planet. And Obito, after absorbing the Ten Tails, became even stronger than that.
Yep.
And then Naruto was even stronger than him. So Naruto does scale to all the power feats from the Ten Tails.
I agree.
Okay. So, would you like to talk about how powerful you think Yusuke is?
Yeah. I think that Yusuke gets to bare minimum planetary plus, even up to large planetary. Generally, what it comes down to is scaling and a difference of DC and AP, which of course we're going to have to talk about, because I think pretty much all your feats there are high DC and not nearly the AP. Let's see though. So we have, of course, I'm just going to bring up the feat you've seen plenty of times, Sensui's Beheaded Hill feat. But we have, let's see if I can get more here. We have Okumin trees that are absolutely massive. We have, here we can see Okumin trees absolutely towered immensely over mountains. I'll address it now because it's of course quick, is that there are Okumin trees that are probably in height, if it was on the plateau next to the mountains, in height, probably about equal to the mountains. That'll be addressed in the future. And we can see the size of Beheaded Hill. I don't know why that became a spoiler. We have the size of Beheaded Hill compared to Okumin trees. Okumin trees already are at least like island sized if you're going off of your general amount of like what's on them. Entire rivers and forests and savannas and plains and mountains. Beheaded Hill comes out to about the size of a small to medium sized country. And Sensui, man, I have a broken mouse. Sensui, of course, busts it with the air pressure of a casual punch. Let's see. Beheaded Hill. What's it doing? I wish I was better with all this. And yeah, let's see. We'll just use this picture. He busts it, and you can see ultimately that all of it gets destroyed. In fact, it is pulverized into dust. If you want to, at the last scan, it's you can click on it and zoom in. Those are not clouds. It has been turned to dust. You can look at the formation of the rocks and how the dust is laid in between each rock. It's impossible for the rocks to appear the way they do. If they were clouds, it would overlap on top of them. And then, of course, Sensui scales. This would require a lot more, so I won't go too much into it right now. Yusuke scales like thousands of times in potency above Sensui. So Sensui has pretty much baseline multi-continental and AP feat, and Yusuke is like thousands of times more potent than him in scaling.
Okay. So I'm obviously going to bring up the different sized Okumin trees. And here I circled the difference with how some of them are tiny compared to the others.
Yep.
And then also, I know you probably don't want to bring it up because, of course, the anime shows some of them are barely larger than human size.
Yeah, I couldn't care less about the anime.
Yeah. And then also this scan shows they don't look. These ones particularly are smaller than the mountains surrounding them, and they don't look much taller than the trees around them either. And hold on. Here we go. As we can see here, the trees around them are normal-sized trees, if not actually on the small side for trees. So I would say there's definitely a big varying in size between these things. So to try to scale up as far as you are is a bit dubious in my opinion. And I have also a couple questions about what you said. You said...
Alright, so I'm going to stop right here. And so let's cover essentially the topic here where we're talking about the size of Okumen trees. Because that's a very important part when we're talking about this. This will, of course, continue, but we now have a couple scans here, and a couple more will come that I will also address, like I said. Now, what we see here is basically the force ends where the force ends on Sensui being taken over the horizon. The trees are actually small. That is definitely true. Now, what I could have argued is, he was literally taken over the horizon. There's nothing that suggests that those trees are, or even need to be, the same height as any of the trees around Beheaded Hill. But that is a separate thing. For a debate purpose, that's on me. In terms of trying to arrive to the most accurate conclusion, that still matters. However, more importantly is the two Beheaded Hill scans that he shows. One of them is decently damning, yes. You would assume that an Okumen tree, based on its size, couldn't possibly, from how it's shown, appear that small to the trees, which do appear to be in the area where Sensui was, though not necessarily so. And then the second one is, as he circled, the small Okumen trees. We know that there are Okumen trees that are smaller. So it's a matter of, well, why would I feel confident that it's the Beheaded Hill scales to the bigger ones? So what you need to ask yourself is, assuming we care about being as accurate and consistent as possible, what seems to be the most consistent when looking at the size of Okumen trees? We have, and this is just fact-based, I'm not swayed, in even close to swayed, in fact, that the most accurate and consistent means of looking at the size of an Okumen tree compared to the Beheaded Hill is anything less than what I said. But regardless, just pure facts here. He does have that one scan, and then another scan that shows that they can be smaller. Against literally every other scan that shows the size of an Okumen tree. Especially so when they are the actual focus. Meaning there's, more thought put into how they would be for a background. Secondarily, not only are they shown to be the much larger size, consistently, which would lead credence to accuracy rather than simply once in the one damning picture here. We also have the very same scan that he was using that shows that they're smaller. Also is a scan that also works in the reasoning behind my opinion, in that it shows how big they can be as well. That size of the larger ones is also much more consistent with what is time and time shown to be the more average and consistent showing of the size of Okumen trees. We would additionally assume to see that if we were to find large ones compared to the Beheaded Hill, that we're looking at this area, you know, as is all of these Oakman trees that are, they're the ones next to Beheaded Hill, we would assume that if we found Oakman trees that are in pairs of 3, or pairs of? Because pair means 2 generally. If we were to find a group of Oakman trees that are a bunch of 3 together, we would assume that most accurately it would appear to be the case that it is of the larger ones. And of course, that also leads credence to what is shown next to Beheaded Hill. To assume, because it is an assumption either way, many things are, that is why you take the path towards being the most accurate and most consistent you can be, as accurate and consistent as possible. You have to assume that by virtue of essentially a scan and a half is more accurate and consistent than every other scan, the plethora of them, and a half. So no, I'm not swayed at all, but that's because I'm going towards what is most accurate and consistent, and consistency is a building block for the accuracy of things. It is simply factual that the consistency is more so leaning towards the size that I have them at. But that's just, it would lead towards it being more accurate, not that it necessarily must be the case. Which, again, is true for everything. So, just wanted to give my thoughts on that. However you want to take it, you can argue it 1,000 different ways. But consistency-wise, Oakman trees are consistently shown to be more in line. Rather, maybe this talk here is me covering why I have things where they are on a not debate scale, but on a trying to achieve the most accuracy and consistency as possible. And so, if any of this is addressed by anybody, in fact, if anyone has any challenge to what I'm saying here, then I would love to hear it. Because more so on a basis of, no, this is how we ought to achieve being the most accurate and consistent. If there's any challenge to what I'm saying here, then I would love that. But the purpose of this is, we ought to value being as accurate and consistent as possible. Here is why my view is such that it is in line with being as accurate and consistent as possible. And I'm covering the factual basis of what goes into the various things in this video that essentially covers, is this actually the most accurate and consistent take? So I remain strongly in my belief that if we care about being as accurate and consistent as possible, Oakman trees are more in line with the size that I'd already been saying. So my opinion will not be changing from that.
Destroying that structure automatically puts him like Continental or Continental Plus, so I would like to know where you're getting that, and I would also like to get where you're getting that Yusuke is thousands of times more powerful than him or more important than him.
Yeah, I was trying to mostly save time, but I can cover all that. So, first with the Oakman tree size. So, with the what you put there, we have that scan, skip anime, and your second scan here, to where we can't actually get a clear view, we don't know our vantage point here. That's a little weird. The easiest...
We don't really need to know the vantage point because we can see the Oakman trees in front of the trees in the background, which means the trees in the background should look even smaller compared to it. Yet we can see that they're a good fraction of their height. And the mountains in the background look bigger as well, and they are also behind.
Let me show you. So you have the last scan there, size of some trees. Of normal size trees. Let's see. That's not the one I want. Shoot, what's it called? I have too many scans, so I'm gotta remember which ones I'm looking for.
Yeah, I have a lot too.
Not Oakeman trees. Just look up Demon World. Gosh dang, it's not this one either. What would I have called it? Fortress? There we go. Okay, so just addressing the size of trees real quick. I guess I put it in reverse order. The bottom one here is the mobile centipede fortress of Makuro. They're on the forehead of it, and you can barely see it. You can also see in the top panel here that it doesn't even tower over the normal trees. You can see the other scans where, again, it confirms that they're on like the very top of it. And the first scan, since it's in reverse order, once again, you can see that it's not towering over trees. Now, as your scan shows, there are other trees that are not that tall. But to say that it's definitely these trees, right? It could be, what we would be looking for is what is most accurate and most consistent. The trees in Demon World
are from that fight specifically, from that area.
That's true. He also got knocked over the horizon, which is any given amount of distance away. Do I need to show the scan of him being knocked over an entire horizon's distance?
Yeah, I think I have that one too. Hold on. Which I want to bring up because Kuwabara said that no one could survive that, implying an attack like that should defeat someone of Sensui's level.
What, the one that knocked him over the horizon?
Isn't like a continental feat or anything.
Wait, what's not continental?
Being blasted to the horizon like that.
What?
Based off of visuals, which is what Kuwabara is going off of.
Kuwabara is like the best sensing, like energy-wise person in the series, and it would be potency that does it. Like a bullet's not going to knock you almost anywheres. It'll still kill you. Like it carrying you is just extra.
Yeah, I mean, it's just presented in a way that's clearly, like, it's showing off the power of it visually.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and all the trees seem to be normal sized.
I mean, what, from their aerial view there? From an unknown distance high?
Well, from the bottom part you posted, you could see their normal size, and also there's no, like, clear indication that trees are getting taller or shorter anywhere along that giant line.
Let's see.
And also going back to the scans you posted before with that bug thing going through, I mean, it looks like there's just a giant, like, dust storm it's creating. Honestly, you can't really see much of what's going on with there in its comparison to the trees.
No. It would, the fact that it's, like, nearing, like, Susanoo height in terms of, like, where they scale to, like, their size compared to it, and it's not towering over every tree to, like, insane.
How do you know it's nearing Susanoo height? I mean, they're on top of its head, but they could just be far enough back to where you can't see them in that scan.
Because they're
I think you're trying to imply that they're so small you can't see them on the top of its head, but like from that angle you just might not be able to see them.
Let's see. Hold on. You know, I will partially I might concede that. Because I might be mixing up anime. Their signal thing, the little Bryu thing, I remember that being, like, on the very, like, just above where it would be, where I'm thinking they would be. But technically the manga doesn't show that. Okay, so... Okay, so I'll agree that, we have The scan. Oh man, so that kind of got a little off topic, but so what you would have noticed there is it was a discussion where it was first talking about like, you know, this one scan seems like it should be a lot bigger. Ultimately, yeah, it should. And it turns out I didn't even notice, but I did argue against the point. It was like they were knocked over the horizon's distance. For it got a little weird there that he brought it in towards like that's not continental. That's irrelevant. Towards like if you're arguing that the trees where since we landed is within the area of Beheaded Hill, the point is that no, it's not because he was knocked an entire over the distance horizon like away in distance. So that was the only contentious point there. That said, he has a few true statements here, which is, one, the trees from the aerial view do not show to get smaller. However, we can't see past the actual horizon to know for certain what goes on over there. And secondarily, we can't see what is before them, just merely what they can see, and then the path, from the demon gun extends from before where they are. Essentially, we can't tell, but we do have an idea that the trees that we can see don't seem to go down wherever those trees are, and that where since we lands, the trees do indeed seem small. So this one, I would say, it's a 50-50. There's no way to, no matter how you wanted to argue it, if you wanted to say this is more evidence for sure, like, in basis against, like, that singular scan, which ultimately, as I've shown already, isn't enough for consistent, like, a consistency argument. However, if you wanted this to be like, yeah, this really, like, shows that one scan, like, really goes for my favor, 50-50, the logic is perfectly sound. The only problem is that there's so many toss-ups that you can't really be sure either way now. I wouldn't be able to claim that I was sure. I would want to see what was before it or after it from what we actually saw. In terms of what we see after it, you could of course say like, oh, well, there's the trees that, they're very small next to Sensui. I'm talking about like after it, like in connection to those very trees that we can see extending past the horizon, like being able to compare those two. If I had to guess, I would, assume that it does show that they end up being about the same size, but that's still a very wild guess. The layout of Demon World could be anything. We could just see like the tiniest of specks in comparison at a certain gap point between. We have no idea, and especially even if they ended up being like the same size, it could be like what's before them is like trees that are way bigger than Okumin trees for all we know, as we can see in different scans that have been shown before, and I'll show right here again. We don't know, so 50-50 towards the one scan, but I still see that this is very largely in favor of showing that, yes, indeed, like the Okumin trees are the size that I claim them to be. I can't think of. I suppose we'll keep. Oh, you know what? However, the fortress thing. Yes, I must have been either I'm missing a page or my memory is purely from the anime. That technically we cannot see from like from where we're viewing them on the moving fortress. We cannot see that they are specifically like on the forehead to get an actual like size comparison. So that one was conceded and ought to be conceded. Cool. All right, that's it. Scans you're showing here, where since we ended up, you have trees, and it looks like the tree area where the fight took place. A lot of the trees are even potentially smaller sized trees. So, okay, well then let's compare to what is most consistent and most accurate still. So you have one where the very first one where you highlighted the small ones are at least the size of mountains in terms of height, not total volume or mass. That would be also towering way above like what's shown. Secondarily, your second one I would agree that that one looks... Ooh, that one's not so good. But then we have to compare it to every other Okumen tree ever shown throughout the entire series, throughout the whole thing after that. So we have, in your very scan, the big ones. They also are the ones that are clustered in 3. If we're trying to be as accurate as possible, what we would be looking for to compare to the size of Beheaded Hill would be, if at all possible, perhaps it's not possible, but in this case it is, we can have 3 Okumen trees that are next to each other. It's more accurate to look for a group of 3 Okumen trees than not if we were to say that it's the big ones. And lo and behold, it is. Also in the top left corner, very hard to see on the scan with the Beheaded Hill compared to the size of Okumen trees. Top left corner, you can see 3 Okumen trees as well. We see 0 Okumen trees that are by themselves. That doesn't mean it's necessarily true that it's the bigger ones, but it's, aside from being a preponderance of evidence, that would be what is more accurate. Then, you have, every time the Okumen trees are actually focused on, they're the focus of the actual story, and Togashi actually puts in some artwork, they house mountains. They're not just like barely the size of a mountain, like they're massive superstructures that carry mountains every single time, like anytime they're the focal point, and it's every single one of them after this in both the other scans there. And then those were for the preliminary rounds. Then we get the let's see, then we get massive whoops. The world is massive. Shoot. Tournament. I can't even see if this is it. Size of Okumen trees. Demon tournament. No. Shoot. I'll just explain it while I'm looking for it. I'm looking for the their Demon World tournament part. Actual like arenas, which are also like based on Okumen trees. That, like the Okumen trees, is supposed to house where they're fighting on the tournament, just as they did in the preliminary rounds. Being based on the Okumen trees, those 2 also, of course, carry entire ecosystems, multiple ecosystems. Savannas, no less, which can take up portions of an entire country. In terms of, like, everybody wanting their opinion to be as accurate and consistent as possible, which should be everyone's goal, I think it's far, far more accurate and consistent throughout every showing of them that Beheaded Hill scales to the large ones. Let's see.
Well, I think we could just agree to disagree on that one, because I think, like, they're Okumen trees, and I believe it's stated they do grow, so obviously they have to start from saplings and go all the way to that size, so there should be varying size all the way. And of course the tournament ones are the large ones, which is a later arc than this one, because they're not going to fight on small ones, they're going to fight on big ones, and they're going to go to an area with a bunch of them. But even if we do accept all of them are that size, I mean, just to have a mountain which can vary in size hugely, and the mountain takes off a good chunk of it, just like visually, like they would still be at best like small island sized, or even just large mountain sized, honestly. Like if you look at something like an island like Hawaii from space, it looks completely like massive compared to it. And that's the small island of Hawaii, I believe. And here's the large island of Hawaii and what that looks like from a range, which also both look much bigger than Beheaded Hill when you look at them far out, which you compare to like a good sized country. And here's what a country looks like. This is a small country, Sicily and Italy, what that looks like from space, which clearly, like, you can't even see the tree specks at all. Like, the visuals is on a completely different level than from what we see at Beheaded Hill. And if we look at the scan you posted with, hold on a second. Here it is.
Jesus, I wish I could.
We could look at what the mountains look like compared to the Okumen trees and plateaus around it. Now here is a scan of what Nagato did when he fought Naruto. He ripped this massive chunk of earth out of the ground, which completely dwarfs the mountains around it. And I would say the mountains are looking at a similar size in comparison, like via like comparing the two sizes of the pictures, they're both pretty small in comparison. Like this thing would be like, it would definitely have more mass than these Oakman trees if their mountains are similar sized. And this version of Nagato is like extremely like fodder to current Naruto.
Well,
And then
I
we
would.
also have Sasuke's meteor fragments that he cut up, that I'll probably bring up later in the potency argument. But these, like, just the chunks that he chopped up are like completely dwarfing these mountains, like that are even tinier in comparison to the scans you showed. So each one of those meteors that Naruto ends up like completely destroying and Sasuke chops up like butter would be like comparable in size to Beheaded Hill. Like honestly, if we took the mid or arguably the highball estimate of those trees.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this goes into AP versus DC. I think that if both of those feats you just put were to have been accomplished by the air pressure from an attack the size of a human fist, that Naruto would scale massively above where I have them.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get into my potency argument later.
But real quick, so you would... this is an interesting thing. Do you just take that the mountains that you're seeing in Naruto there are the size, like, based on, like, how we have mountains in real life?
I think that's debatable, but if we're going to do it for the mountains you're showing, we have to do it for the ones Naruto's showing. We either do it for neither or both, just to be fair.
No, I agree. Do you think it's more consistent or accurate to... like, what basis would you take? Just in your opinion, I'm curious. Do you think it's better to do it for neither, or better to do it for both?
I would say if there's nothing directly contradicting their size, we should assume by visuals they are like around mountainish size. You could argue like, oh, maybe they're a little on the small side, but like,
so,
I think we should consider that they are about mountainish size. I think that's fair.
Unless shown otherwise?
Yeah.
Okay, so, of course, alright, remember that the final battlefields that are based on the Oakman trees have entire plains in them. This would be like the Great Plains, which is by far not even close to the biggest one. And this is like the amount of space it takes up. So what I would say, and this isn't an actual like full argument, this would be something like, on what basis would you say that they're not the size that they could even be country sized, like the Oakman trees alone?
Well, yeah, savannas could be of any size, but I mean, there was a mountain, a lake, and a desert, I believe what is stated, and they're all of similar size on there. They're different ecosystems, and they're all comparable to the mountain in size. Like, you could see what the trees look like, and visually, like, you can't watch, like, a country, like, a battlefield on a country. It's obviously not that sized. Like, it just wouldn't make sense visually.
Here we go. Well, that's why... So the reason why it is important is because we're talking about fiction, and anything could be the size of anything. We have, of course, especially if you're going to be talking about demon world, extra mythical place within a, fiction that's based on real world things. If you're going to say, for example, these mountains are probably best taken as mountain level unless contradicted in some way. Okay, fine. But then you have what has an entire lake, a desert, a plains, a jungle, mountain, in a demon world area. Pretty much like, how do you say that the plains wouldn't be that size? How would you say that the desert isn't?
Plains just mean grasslands. It's just areas of grass. That's what it means.
And
like, you can have grasslands or fields of any size. Like, there's not like the Great Plains of the United States is just long stretches of giant plains, but like, you could have an island with plains on it. You could have an island with a desert on it. Like,
I'm pretty sure we have like a full list of like what we denote as like your general idea of like, here's plains like throughout the world. And like the Great Plains again aren't even close to the biggest.
Yeah, I'm not saying they aren't, but there's probably tiny ones as well. Unless there's
What?
like the definition of plains have to be a certain size. Like mountains have a definition of how big you have to be a mountain. As far as I'm aware, there's no definition of plains needing a certain size.
The smallest plain landform in the world can be found in North America. It is called the Great Plains. I mean, let's see. Plain, any relatively level area of the Earth's surface exhibiting gentle slopes and small local relief. Plains vary widely in size. The smallest, let's see, maybe here. Don't continue to cite. Okay, let's see. The smallest occupy only a few hectares, whereas the largest covers hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. For example, the Great Plains of North America. In the expansive, gently undulating land that sweeps from Pyrenees Range on the French-Spanish border across northern Europe and Asia, almost halfway around the world, nearly to Bering Sea.
I mean, either way, that just seems like such a big stretch of like, and I doubt it's anything to do with author's intent. I doubt he was like, oh well, yeah, this is a plain, so this is how big I think this is gonna be. I mean, it's definitely a big ass tree, but it has a mountain, it has a forest, it has a lake, it has a desert, it has plains. Like, there's supposed to be different areas where they could fight on. Like, they're different terrain. I don't think they were meant to show.
I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to actually argue that the Oakman trees would actually be country level. All I'm trying to show is that it is vastly more likely that Beheaded Hill scales much closer to like a country in size. That you have pretty much one, maybe the two scans that can somewhat question the size, whereas every other showing of what an Oakman tree is in size vastly leans into the favor of it being more in line with the size I'm saying. It's more of a preponderance of evidence. I don't actually argue for like country-sized Oakman trees. I would argue for country-sized Beheaded Hill.
Okay, but I mean, even the Oakman trees in that area, none of them had visual mountains or lakes or plains on them. So I'm not sure if that's relevant in this case. But I mean, those bigger ones in the scan are clearly bigger than the mountains around them. So I would say they're at least large-ish mountain level in width. And then the Beheaded Hill does dwarf them. So I would argue if you go off the Oakman argument and visuals, you could easily argue a good-sized island. But like, just I think country level is going too far. But even if you did go country level, I would still say Naruto wins. It would just be much closer.
Maybe we should delve into APDC then, because I think AP and DC is being conflated here, and we'll see.
Yeah, okay. I just have a couple less things to show for power, and then we could move right into potency right there.
Sure.
What was that?
I said sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and that about wraps up the part 1 of Naruto versus Yusuke, going over mostly size scaling, a little bit of feats showing like AP that would be coming, but that'll be most likely part 2 coming up, where AP's actually more so explored. But all right, so let's delve in into basically what is the most accurate for the sizes of Oakman trees. Once more, last part, because as you saw, I'm bringing up, ought we take the size of things that we see and compare them to what we know of. For example, again, as I said with like a mountain, if we see a mountain in fiction, it could be, it's fiction. The mountain could be the size of a planet. It could be the size of a pebble. But unless shown otherwise, most accurately, the most we could do simply is compared to other mountains based on the rubrics that we have set out for like real life. So the argument was never that Oakman trees are the size of a country, but simply that for them to have entire plains and everything on them, they must be a size that is at minimum like entire island size. I believe at one point he says something about like large mountain size. I don't even know how to combat that. That's just I guess decide for yourself. This isn't for a debate thing. Just deep diving into the facts of the matter and what's brought up. But it is more than just planes. Planes I thought was probably the easiest way, to go about showing the size. But I did more delving into like the size of a planes. And he's talking about like planes can be, they could be any size, I suppose. But generally, when we're looking at what we denote as planes in the world, that's why I'm talking about like the Great Plains being one of the smallest for the world. However, there are much tinier ones, and I'm now convinced, if we were to be as most accurate and consistent as possible, since we don't know the actual guaranteed size of it, then bare minimum, the plains would be the size of, in square miles, about the size of whatever given mountain, based on the actual picture itself. But there's nothing to say that the Demon World mountains aren't also bigger, which does have proof I'll be getting to right here. But that would be their bare minimum size. But plains, as you can see here, can be shown to be as little, I went to Japan for this, as little as about 77 square miles. 77 is not even close to what you would be looking for to make an argument for, let's say, country-sized oakum trees, right? Well, I should have, in this case, if we're going back to the debate, brought up deserts then. So let's just cover, again, the facts. Oakum trees have plains, mountains, like forests, or rather, they share the size of the final battlefields, in which case that's what they were based on, with the final battlefields that have mountains, which oakum trees do have, forests, deserts, plains, jungle, whatever. Well, if we look at the size of deserts, we actually have like ranked the smallest deserts in the world. And in fact, it's even shown in the world record books for like the smallest desert in the world. We can look at to lowball as much as possible, of course. And if we compare to, first I'll pull up the size of islands. You can see here different square miles of islands. And I want you to pay attention to Cuba and how many square miles it is, because what I'm about to show you here is what was considered one of the smallest deserts ever, which had very few square miles. I can't remember exactly what it shows, because I'm doing this from memory from my end. But then as I kept reading, because I am reading, and if it was in fact like this was the smallest desert, and that's what we denoted as the smallest desert, then this point would factually just not stand. However, the facts do just so happen to agree with what I was talking about. And as you keep reading it, that's not the smallest desert. I believe it's Atacama Desert, close enough to the pronunciation. The smallest desert is actually about 41,000 square miles, which is, as you can see here, slightly larger than Cuba. That's like the smallest desert. Pretty much still fact-based, at least, however you want to take it. There's still a very easy argument to make that oakum trees can rival into country-sized. Because if that was the smallest desert, realistically, given that there's trees the size of what an oakum tree is, having a desert lowballed to the smallest that we have in the entire world, everything else on it would scale to that size. Or logistically could. Again, the point is simply that I'm not trying to use country-sized oakum trees, although you definitely could, as I've said before. The point is that country-sized Beheaded Hill, if we're talking about accuracy and consistency, I can only rule that the facts show that Beheaded Hill is bare minimum country-sized off of pretty much everything shown. All the facts support it. There's very, very, very minimal amounts of pretty much anything that goes against it. This isn't anything other than looking at what is presented, though. So if there's like a counter evidence, by all means bring it up. But from everything I've been looking into, it simply seems to hold even more strongly. You would have to take the minimal amount of evidence that it's not the size of like a country, or Oakman trees aren't the size of like an island, at least, and accept that over the mountains of evidence that say otherwise, which seems like you no longer seem to care about being as accurate or consistent as possible. Which delves into like you just don't like Yu Hakusho for some reason or something. I don't know. But I don't think that that's where he takes it. I just simply, because I still feel like he's very good faith, I just don't understand why he's more convinced by like 1.5 scans versus like everything else. So that's after looking at everything, and from there, make your own decisions, I suppose. This video, of course, would already be too long as it is. But nothing's being cut. Nothing will be cut going into the future. And I'll be going into part 2, talking about AP versus DC, and simply recapping what's covered and deep diving into the pure facts of the matter. So I hope you guys enjoy. Hopefully these are a bit more bite-sized videos, even though this is already long enough. But that you can actually enjoy it and take in everything at once. And man, it's so hard for it to not seem biased. I really am trying to look at just the facts. I of course believe that all these facts agree with what I say, but hopefully you're just looking at what I'm talking about is just the facts as is. There's all these panels that show Oakman tree is X size. There's these other panels that show it's this size. There's many, many more that show Oakman tree is closer to the first size than the other, right? That's what I'm trying to really nail into. So going forward, that's essentially what I'll be trying to do. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in part 2.